Hi, I'm April Neal. I'm a software engineer at WP Engine. I imagine that many of your weeks look a lot like mine do. You have deadlines looming. The PMOs are looking at the burn down charts. Your team was handed a microservice as the architect walked out the door for a new venture. There's something going on that's a little bit strange. There's pressure for new features, faster deliveries, lower costs. In the meantime, you feel like you should be learning. There's new frameworks, new container architectures. Maybe this weekend, you'll spend time building that microservice. Or maybe you'll end up binge watching Stranger Things. Many of us feel this way. There isn't time to learn at the office. So today, I'm going to be sharing ways to foster technical growth through company culture, structure, and resources so that we feel like we are learning while we're at our jobs. The first thing I want to talk about is the effect of company culture and lightweight social expectations. When you ask someone to describe the behavior of people around them, what you'll actually get is they're describing how they behave. I think we've all been at that job where somebody 2 desks over spends the entire day watching YouTube, and somebody around the corner is reading Reddit. And when you're in a job like that, you feel like everyone else is goofing off and reading those things, and you don't feel bad about it. That's what you're doing as well. So what we want to do with company culture is how can we pivot it? How can we make it so that it feels like everyone around us is learning? Everyone around us is playing with new frameworks and getting better and sharing knowledge. And how can we have an environment where learning is an accepted, acknowledged, and rewarded part of the culture? So at WP Engine, this comes down from the top in our 5 core values. They are do the right thing, customer inspired, where the best get better, built to last, aspiring to lead, committed to give back. What's really awesome about these values is that they come down from the top in the way that our executives interact with each of us every day and the way that they interact with our customers. We celebrate these by acknowledging each other with what we call kudos, which is where you write up a quick, hey, one of my coworkers did this thing really great. Maybe it's just they did part of their job really well. Maybe it's they went beyond their job, but just acknowledging each other when we live up to these values. We also have the opportunity to nominate our coworkers 4 times a year for these values. So you pick a value and you talk about how this person really shines at being built to last. The way that they designed or implemented this microservice had a lot of forward thinking, and it's really cool to be able to nominate each other for these kinds of things, and it also keeps these in the front of your mind. And because we really believe these, they filter down through all sorts of conversations. We'll be talking about how we're going to handle this bug, and we're talking about, are we solving this the right way for the customers? Are we solving this the right way for what we have built currently? Is this going to scale properly? And so having these values just be a part of our everyday conversation, and they filter into everything that we do. The other thing I wanted to talk about is a set of lightweight social rules. These are from a place called the Recurse Center, which is a programming kind of a boot camp, but it's a programming retreat in New York City. What's unique about this is that it is free and it doesn't have a curriculum. And programmers come there to learn and to get better and to spend time getting better at their craft. And the way that they have structured it so that people, kind of just rules to get along, they have 3 rules. And they're meant to be self-policing. So you can call yourself out on them, you call others out on them, and it's not a big deal because they're fairly lightweight. The first one is no feigning surprise. It means you shouldn't act surprised when people say they don't know something. And this can be technical or non-technical of, really? You didn't know you could run tests in your IDE? This is not, it doesn't have a lot of benefit when you do things like that. It can make people feel worse about themselves. It makes people not want to ask questions. And people don't feel comfortable admitting they don't know things. So it's a really easy thing to commit to that can make a big difference. The next one is no well actuallys. And this happens when someone says something that's almost but not entirely correct, and you generally interrupt them with, well, actually. So someone's talking about in stand-up about how they're almost finished implementing these unit tests, and this is where they are, and you're like, well, actually, that's a functional test, not a unit test. It doesn't add much to the conversation. It's not particularly relevant, and it's about showing off that you know knowledge and that you know what's happening. And the last one is no backseat driving. So a lot of us work in open offices. It's really easy to hear things that are going on around you. You might have two coworkers who are working through a problem, and you're a little bit paying attention, but not quite paying attention. And you just yell something across the room. This can be really detrimental because maybe you didn't fully understand the scope of the problem, and then you send them off on a goose chase going the wrong direction. And the idea behind this is that if you want to participate in a conversation, fully participate, join the conversation. Don't just be listening halfway in and trying to throw things out there. And yeah. So when you have a culture where not knowing is okay, where you let people ask questions, and you respond in a way that lets them feel like it's okay to ask questions, I think that you're actually increasing how fast you can move. People don't feel like they have to look up how things work and present the perfect pull request. They can throw something up there, get feedback on it. You can chat about it, throw out some ideas, and then move forward. And you might be able to identify a better solution and move forward faster. So that's what I wanted to talk about in terms of culture, of just making a place where you feel like the people around you are also learning, that it's okay to spend time learning, and that it's okay not to know everything. The next thing I want to talk about is how do you build in the structure to dedicate time to growing and learning. One thing that makes a big difference is having learning and mentorship and growth being part of your career advancement. Having it as a box that you check in terms of promotions is a big motivator for people to actually do this. For junior engineers, this can be in terms of seeking mentorship, that when they are formally or informally paired up with a mentor, that they are able to drive that and ask questions and just want to learn things and be able to receive feedback and move forward. As a mid to senior engineer, this can be being willing to grow the people around you and spend the time doing that. This can take a lot of different forms. It can take the form of one-on-one mentorship. It can take the form of sharing articles that you think are interesting and leading discussions on them. And it can be both formal and informal. I think at our company, we typically do this pretty informally. We want you to have a connection and be able to communicate well with the person you're mentoring with. Sometimes there's a person that you just aren't on the same page. So we do it a little bit more informally. And another thing that's important with mentorships is to have a kind of a goal in mind, whether that's like a time frame or I want to learn this specific thing, so that you can reevaluate at a certain point and say, yes, this is going well, let's keep going, or maybe this isn't what we need to do right now. And that's good for both people to feel like you're not stuck in this thing that if it doesn't work out, it's going to keep going for forever. Another thing we do is have code stewards. At WP Engine, we use a lot of frameworks. We have Rails apps, Django apps. We use Python on its own. We use PHP, Golang, and all of those have multiple different deployments. And we really like using new frameworks and new technologies too. So there's a lot going on. So what we've done is, when you have a feature, you might have to contribute to multiple repositories, multiple different languages. So we have code stewards who are a final check on the pull requests for those. And that's the opportunity to provide guidance on maybe this repo requires you to do a certain kind of testing, or maybe there's best practices for this language. And these are meant to be not a blocker to merging, but providing information so that as you continue writing more in this language you're not familiar with, you'll know the best practices and get better at it. So here's like some samples from 3 different languages to add on here. Often you'll see these comments saying specifically like, this is not a blocker, but you might want to consider this. Or we want to try using this. You'll see a lot of links to best practices or to documentation. You'll see sample code of like, this might be a way you could do this better. So if you're wondering, the first one is Rails, Python unit testing, and Go. Another thing that we do, and this idea originated from Spotify, is having topical guilds. We have these based on languages, frameworks. We have an agile guild, we have an open source guild, we have testing guilds. And the way that these started out is just in our chat client, we create a room that says whatever guild. So when people are looking, they can just go and search for any of the guilds and have a place to look, have a place to ask questions. So this allows anyone to jump in there and ask a quick question, to talk about new releases for the language, what's happening, different changes that are coming up, and it's like a centralized location to have these discussions. It's also been really great as we try to sync across different teams and projects to see what other people are doing. So for example, here's one for our Jenkins guild, where instead of trying to dig through documentation or create a pull request and then put it up in Jenkins and see if it passes or not, just ask a quick question, are we allowed to use this function? And then somebody else can chime in and really quickly be like, oh, why don't you use this instead? For some of our guilds that are a lot more active, they'll have weekly or monthly meetings to get together and sync. And this was really helpful for all of our Ruby apps. We deploy to Heroku in a lot of different ways and using a lot of different pipelines. And it's been really helpful for us to be able to all get in a room and talk about what's working and what isn't working. Does the GitHub hooks work better? Does just pushing from our laptops, does having the pipelines work better? How about review apps? And kind of trying to standardize across all the ways that different teams are doing it, so that as we're moving from microservice to microservice, you have an idea of how each one works and can hopefully unify and have it one way instead of 10 different ways. We also do regular meetings. So we have groups based on levels. So our engineering leaders for each team, they have a group that meets together and they try to be more of a group of action. So they talk about the things that all of our teams are seeing, common problems in tech debt, and try to figure out how they want to solve them, what it would take to decouple things in our monolith. So if we can break down these files and better abstract it, then eventually we can move to microservices and making that change. We have a group called Grown Up Devs that was formerly Junior Devs, and then there were a lot of promotions. And that group is open to anyone at any level, but it's intentionally called that because it's meant to be a space where you can ask intro-level questions for any topic, and you can cover a lot of things. And the topics we cover in that group are looking at different algorithms, and we'd like to spend a lot of time doing hands-on of like introducing, spending 15 to 30 minutes actually coding an algorithm, and then talking about why we did it that way. We'll also do a design pattern. We'll look at doing Terraform or deploying into Kubernetes, and just having the opportunity to try something out and talk about why it works and didn't, and dig into those details. The other thing that's really awesome about that group is that teaching each other helps you to learn. And so if you allow someone who isn't an expert to throw together, 10, 20 minutes of material on something, and then pull in a senior engineer to stand next to them and help them out when they get stuck, that allows that person to learn a lot while sharing with their coworkers and generating a conversation that a lot of people are going to learn from. And our architects also meet on a regular basis in addition to driving the technical direction of the company, right now they're all reading Clean Architecture by Robert Martin and then getting together to talk about like those principles and keep those in mind as they're continuing to determine where our technical roadmap is going to go. We have a bi-weekly all engineering group, and that's what we do more of lightning talks. We call it EFFN, which stands for Engineering Full Frontal Nerdity. And some of the things that we do there, which is not necessarily every time, but we'll have a tech debt story time. I was fixing something, a bug in this repo, and I noticed this file that hadn't been touched since 2012. And then I dug in, and we'd never used it. So I deleted 200 lines of code, and it's fun being able to celebrate and acknowledge cleanup. Like, everybody's excited about that. There can also be the testing tip of the week, like remember that these tests run in parallel, so don't use timestamps as a unique ID, those kinds of things. And security tip of the week, which is often don't leave your computer unlocked when you walk away. We also, because we have a lot of different teams learning new Kubernetes deployment things, using Helm, those different things, and we're learning and implementing those things differently in different teams, yet we want to share similar ideas. We've started broadcasting and recording our sprint demos. So at the end of every sprint, every 2 or 3 weeks, we'll make those available. And it's really nice as an engineer to be sitting at your desk and maybe just listening in remotely to another team presenting something and hearing ideas that you're like, oh, maybe we could sync up with this other team to do that in a similar way. And we've seen that be really successful too. There was a team that had been automating things in Postman, which is it's an interface for doing HTTP requests, and they'd figured out a way to automate things. And then a sprint later, a team had figured out a way to put that into automated testing. So we're getting a lot out of that as well. And then another thing that's important to learning and growth is fostering connections between teams and across the organization. So, so this graphic here is showing a web application that came from a hackathon called Lunch Meet. And what it does is every week it pairs up 3 different people from different departments and sends out an email. It's like, hey, maybe you want to get lunch with these other people this week. And it's been a really great way to initiate conversations across the departments. And so this is by department showing the different connections to all the different departments. And the thickness of the lines are like how many people have met from each department to the other departments. This has been really great because it puts a face on finance or marketing. So you're not just like, oh yeah, marketing needs this thing, we've got to knock it out. So that's been really cool, and it was a really simple app that's made a really big difference. The other thing we do is our engineering support rotation, where an engineer can volunteer for 1 to 3 days to go and sit with support, to see what our customers are asking for, what the customer pain points are, what our support pain points are, because engineering has to build the tools for support to use as well. And that can make a huge difference when you see, oh, you're struggling with that. Why don't we just move this capability to where you can get it easier instead of having to log into the command line and search for something and read through files? Like, we can really easily make a tool to help you with that. Something else I wanted to mention here is that we have distributed teams. So we have an engineering office over in Ireland, which means that not only we're in different locations, we're across different time zones. And so building these connections is really important, and having these like regular meetings and sprint demos and things that are unifying and having those recorded and available is really important to bridge that time zone gap. Another thing we've done with them that's been really great is we created this meeting that we call Chinwag, which is a meeting that's on the calendar for an hour each week with no agenda, and it's only the engineers who are allowed to come, and you talk about whatever you want. So you talk about the things that you would usually talk about with your coworkers when you get back to your desk after lunch and that kind of thing, and it's allowing time to do that with people who you don't sit next to. So that's been really helpful for us. Yeah, and then the last thing I wanted to talk about was resources, having the right tools for the right job. I think for a lot of us, our immediate resource is Google or Stack Overflow. You can't always find the answers there. So something that's really important as we're using new technologies is going to conferences. These are still in development. It's really important to see how other companies are handling these challenges, the practices that they're using. Are we going in the right direction, or are we just totally missing something that everybody else has been seeing? So sending people to conferences and then having them come back and share the knowledge that they got in one of those regular meetings that we have is really important. Another one is books, and having those resources that it's not just a series of blog posts scattered across the internet, but having something that you can actually read and go in depth on a topic. There's a lot of services out there that allow your company to subscribe. There's like PacketPub and Safari and O'Reilly and a bunch of them. And what we found, once we got that subscription, people started reading a lot of books. And that's what's generated a lot of conversation for those regular meetings is we all have the ability to be in book clubs and read the same books and have access to it without having to buy it or fill out a zillion expense reports and those kinds of things. And the last one is videos. There's so much great content from previous conferences that people went to or didn't go to, and it's really easy to just grab your coworkers and say, hey, let's watch this video at lunch and then talk about what's being shown. And that's a really easy way to get conversations going and be learning about new things and, yeah, just refreshing your memory. And I think that's all I have. Are there any questions? Yeah, so our engineering team is about 100 including management, so I'd say like 60-ish engineers. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes?
You mentioned the Recurse Center.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious, could you talk more details about it? Like what level of expertise? Is it like blind leading the blind, no one's figured it out, or are there some people who have a lot of experience?
Yeah, so it's a really incredible place. It is, you have to apply to get in because it's totally free, and they want you to have enough programming experience that you can come in with an idea of what you want to do and not be totally lost. And so there are people who do that. I would say a majority of the people who come are seasoned programmers who want time to work on personal projects and fall back in love with programming, and and they drive a lot of that. And the idea is that while you're there, you're going to collaborate. You're going to pair with people on technologies you haven't seen before. You might have a project that you want to focus on for the time that you're there, but you're also having the opportunity to be exposed to new things. And they do a lot of similar things of like weekly lightning talks and regular workshops and things like that. And it's a really amazing place to learn a lot really quickly. Yes?
So how diverse is your team? And because you showed a lot of diversity,
Mm-hmm.
your programming language-wise, but how diverse is your team by education and other aspects? And how do you handle this diversity? And please repeat the question to the mic.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So the question was, how diverse is the team? And so in terms of backgrounds, we have people on our engineering team who have been programming for 20 plus years. We have people who have been hired from boot camps. We have people who have come over from other backgrounds. My background is not in programming. I'm a mechanical engineer who's moved into programming. And so we have a lot of different backgrounds. I really enjoy being at WP Engine because it is pretty diverse in terms of male-female ratio. We have quite a few women who already work there, which makes it a really great place to be. And I think that's something I really appreciate, is that they appreciate diverse backgrounds and what that brings to the team. So, and did I answer?
How do you handle this diversity? Because when there's a lot of diversity, you have to ways to handle it. So you showed some, but Can you elaborate on this? Please repeat this.
Okay, and so wants to know how we handle the diversity. So I think one of the things that's really important is valuing and listening to each other. Yeah, so everyone's opinion is valuable, whether they're a new engineer or a senior engineer, and really taking the time to listen and hear each other. In terms of diversity of just the sheer number of languages and frameworks we have, we try to make sure that when the project is being started, that the architects are taking a look and are we choosing the right tools for this? Do we have the right dev team available who has that experience or who wants to learn they want to learn Django, they want to learn Rails, those kinds of things. And another way that we do this is we have I think they call it a blind interview process, where when we are interviewing applicants to hire them, we intentionally strip all mentions of who they are from their coding submission, and like what level they're supposed to be, and we just grade the coding submission based on, would we want to maintain this? And those kinds of things, like, does this make sense? Can we understand what's happening here? So that's how we try to continue having and growing a diverse workforce. Yes.
So in a typical week, how much time would you say your engineers are spent in these meetings about technical growth?
So, okay, yes. So in a typical week, how much time are our engineers spending in meetings about technical growth? I would say in a 2-week period, it's probably about 2 or 3 hours. Yes.
How many of these meetings are mandatory or like kind of not enforced, but highly suggested, or are they very open?
Okay, so the question is, how many of these meetings are mandatory? None of the growth meetings are mandatory. Those are all optional. They make us come to the sprint ceremonies. So, yeah, yes.
Where did the initiatives come from? Like, are these from the highest level of the company, the CEO came up with it, or is this more a natural, like you guys as employees came up with it and started doing it and they adopted it, or how did it come to be?
Yeah, so the question is, where did the initiatives come from? Did they come from the executives had these great ideas and said, you will do it, or did they come from the bottom up? So the core values, when we hired our current CEO, like the company at the time worked together to develop those and agree to those and commit to those. So the core values have come from the top down. And then everything, all the other practices that we do has come from the bottom up. Someone had an idea of like, hey, wouldn't it be great if all the dev leads got together and just emailed all the dev leads and they started meeting together. There were some junior engineers who decided they all wanted to level up and work on growing and learning together. And so they started that meeting. And then there was somebody heard about the Spotify guilds and thought, hey, this could really work for us. Let's start doing this. And so all of that started from the bottom up. Yes.
So I'm curious, you say you do about 2 hours every 2 weeks. Microsoft has been doing book clubs, something similar to the guild system, and it's been very successful for us, but there's a feeling of time stress there, of like, everyone does this is amazing, I want to do all these clubs, but I don't have enough time to do everything. And so there's a balance there. How do you guys manage that balance?
Yeah, so the question is that we all feel pressed for time and that we wish we had more time to devote to learning, and how do we find that balance? So I think one of the things that's really awesome is that our managers feel like growth is really important as well. And they want us to meet our sprint commitments, but they also want us to commit to a reasonable amount of work. And when we finish that, they'll say, don't pull in more things. Like, you finished what you committed to, take that time to technical growth and learning. And they are also okay, and they know that we have time set aside for, they are optional meetings, but grown-up devs meets at this time, dev leads meets at this time, and that time has been okayed and cleared. Obviously, if you break something, you might need to skip the meeting, but yeah, management has a lot of buy-in. And one of the reasons, I think, as well, is that it's really important for engineers to be growing and learning. Engineers in this industry move around a lot, and a large reason is because you want to feel like you're growing and learning, and you feel like you have to change companies to do that. If your company is allowing you to grow and learn and try the new technologies, they might have you there a lot longer. Yes?
What's your turnover?
What is our turnover? I don't know. I can look that up for you, but I don't know. But we do lose a couple engineers every so often, whether it's because they and their spouses are moving to another place or they want to go make more money somewhere else. I'm sure that that's happening. Yes.
Unless there are more questions, I have something. You seem to be emphasizing the learning parts, and you keep on repeating the word learn. You want your engineers to learn. This also means you're adding new projects so people can learn to do, or you're coming up with new things, or like becoming kind of a research organization? And repeat the question.
Okay. So the question was that I seem to be emphasizing learning, and are there new projects so that people can be learning different things? I think one of the things at our company is that we, as a company, prioritize learning and think that it's very important. And we are interested in new technologies. And so as we look towards the future and our tech roadmap, we have the architects have put together an accepted technology list, but there's also technologies that we're interested in investigating. And so it's not that we're creating new projects just to learn. We are solving technical challenges that we already have, but we're open to looking into new ways to solve these. Yes.
Yes, so I guess you mentioned a lot of different techniques. I'm just curious, with remote work, which ones are better for remote and basically, like our company is very distributed, so a lot of these techniques probably wouldn't work for us, but we want to do more learning. And so we have, one of our big projects is, we're so widely distributed across time zones. We have time to do a lot of this cross-team, cross-location communication.
Yeah, so the question is, when you have teams that are really widely distributed across time zones and locations, what are some of the recommendations that we found work really well? So one thing we found works really well is having the guilds be in chat rooms, because the conversation is still going whenever people log in to look at it. And so and sometimes there's engineers who are just up at midnight as well. But having that there, that whenever you do log in your morning, you can see what's happening. That's been really helpful for sharing things across time zones. And then, having things recorded so that people don't have to be present and they feel like they're not missing out on things has been really important as well. Yes.
There's a Python conference. Tell us more about the Python tools you use.
Okay, pull this back to Python. So we have a lot of Django applications and also some that are just Python without the Django framework. And one of the things that we've done that I think is really cool there is that we've built a generator to spin up microservices. So you say, I want a Django microservice, and you answer a few questions about it, and it rolls out the basic Django microservice, and with the Jenkins files and your testing files and everything set up so that you can really quickly spin up microservices. I think this also gives us the opportunity to hire people from different backgrounds with .NET backgrounds or with Ruby backgrounds, those kinds of things. And they can come in and they can learn Python because we have the resources here. We can hire Python developers and they can work on other projects because we have those resources.
We have more time. If you want to elaborate or anything, go ahead.
I think I'm good. Feel free. Feel free to reach out. I'd love to hear if you guys have suggestions of things that you do or resources and talks that you find really great. Feel free to get in touch. Thank you.